It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Vivienne Ming, whose company, Socos, is firmly founded in education with a mission to help parents and support the lifelong development of their child. Now, I know that most of you are not parents, but what's fascinating about Socos are the algorithms and the research that went into this product. And Dr. Ming is a scientist. I know a number of you are thinking about going along that path, so I thought it would be pretty enlightening for you to see how a researcher goes about new ventures. Plus, she really is an incredibly vivacious speaker. I would describe Dr. Ming as someone who's deeply curious, and that I say after looking into her background a little bit. After perusing not only her LinkedIn, but various articles, and she was even in Oprah, I found that she's dabbled in everything from, let's see, I list it here, and I even have handwritten notes: movie production, shellfish operations and sales. She went to UC Davis as a research assistant and helped develop algorithms to detect lying, even from videos. She earned her master's in psychology and a doctorate in computational neuroscience and psychology from Carnegie Mellon. And somewhere in between, maybe after that, she developed an app to address diabetes, which I think she'll be talking about. She went on to found 3 successful companies: Ogniscient, which was sold to Rabbit, which just last year was named one of the top 10 most innovative video companies by Fast Company. Then she developed Conga, which focused on professional networking, and together with her wife Norma Ming and former student Ergen Bombayer, I'm hoping I pronounced that right, she founded Socos. In between, she's also been the chief data scientist at Guild, a technology recruiting firm, which focuses a lot and develops a lot from algorithms. She's a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley. She's been a board member or advisor to StartOut.com, Emosia, Bay Area Rainbow, and to round it all out, financial services, Credit Suisse. As you know, she's been named one of Inc. magazine's 10 women to watch in technology, but I have to tell you, it's really hard to keep up with her. So it'll be fun watching. And without further ado, given that Professor Sidhu has finished speaking with her, nope, not yet. Let's see if we can maybe, with an applause, start to welcome Dr. Vivienne Ming. Here she is. I know that should we put something on the PowerPoint?
Yeah, what the hell? We're going to give a talk.
Okay.
Or we can, by applause, I can do a tap dance instead. I can make certain you regret that.
Is that
right? I can talk as we get going here. So anyone who's ever heard me give a talk on campus before, and I've given a few, you may recognize some of the slides I'm going to present, but I'm going to give it a slightly different spin than I have in the past to talk about both my trip from being an academic to being an entrepreneur. Google's so slow. And then what I learned about building product. Because it turns out building product is wildly different than doing science. Not simply in the methodology, but in the mindset behind it. Actually, I think being a scientist in method is wonderfully aligned. I'm so sick of people talking about their data-driven businesses when all they're doing is staring at 1,000 bar graphs on a Domo dashboard with no sense of what any of them are telling them. If you think your data is talking to you, you should take some medication, because it's just stuff. If you're not asking it questions, then you don't understand the answers it's giving back to you. But there is some fundamental difference between being a scientist and being an entrepreneur and being in industry in terms of how you approach problems and how you build solutions. So this is my own particular turn. And when I think about what I do as an academic and an entrepreneur, and I do a lot of nonprofit work as well, the easiest way for me to explain it is to say that I'm interested in maximizing human potential. Now, that sounds like a line. It sounds like we're now going to have like a self-help seminar. But I'm a theoretical neuroscientist by training, and I'm a hard scientist By inclination, I'm interested in data and numbers. I use machine learning. I study the brain. I want to know what I can truly change about people to make the world a better place. Whether this is education or labor markets or health technology, it doesn't really matter. Anything that falls in this space is of interest to me. Right now, I'm at 17 affiliations, plus 2 books and 2 kids. That means I have an incredible problem with saying no. But
That's so great.
yes, but the one thing, this is 2 mics. The one thing I don't have a problem with saying no to is anything that doesn't fall in line with this. So I've had some amazing job offers over recent years at the most incredible places, all of which I immediately wrote back. I'm sorry, but this will have to be another in a long line of terrible career decisions. Because I knew that they weren't aligned with what I really wanted to accomplish. And they might be fun for a year, but then I'd be sick of it, and they'd be sick of me. And success doesn't come from taking the top opportunity that comes along. It comes from finding great alignment with the things that get you out of bed in the morning. So let's start with academia to entrepreneurship. So this is work I did as a graduate student. I literally took a microphone and walked around in a forest in Pittsburgh and recorded the sounds of birds and my own footsteps and the loam and the sound of wind through the leaves. And then based on information theory, we designed a system that learned how to hear. In fact, it learned just as I walked around. So what's exciting about that? Could it possibly say? Well, what's exciting, and you're seeing here a little animation I made of the system learning how to hear. So this is a very early version of work in convolutional generative networks. So this is a sparse coding model, but built in a convolutional space. And it turned out it did 2 things. One, it showed the same sorts of sparsity that you see in the mammalian brain in terms of the spiking behavior of the brain you saw in the coding behavior of our network. But also, if you took any of these individual kernel functions and you compared them, it's an engineering crowd, I can talk about this stuff, and you compare them against the linear filter estimates of the mammalian brain, turned out these actual kernels you see, you could literally just normalize both of them and lay them right on top of each other. So even though we didn't do anything remotely biological in our model, it turned out its solutions fell right in line with the mammalian auditory system. So I really enjoyed this, and we wrote some high-profile papers. I gave a bunch of talks. It was a lot of fun. It was cool being a hotshot in graduate school. And people would come to me and say, well, what can you build with this? And I was like a purist scientist. You don't build things. That's what the bad people do, is they leave science and they go build things. And they said, could you do like audio compression? How does this compare with MP3? Turns out we did a few experiments. It does actually a phenomenally good job against MP3, particularly at very, very low bitrate ranges. But again, it just doesn't get me out of bed in the morning. But I found something that did. So this is a cochlear implant. This baby has essentially a hearing aid, but that hearing aid is then connected by a little magnetic induction to an implanted set of wires that connect that hearing aid directly into the auditory nerve, the 8th cranial nerve. And then everything that the filters process in the hearing aid directly stimulates the brain. And when you do that on a little baby like this, when they grow up, you have to run experiments on them to tell that they were ever deaf. So this is a cure for profound peripheral deafness. It's worth noting that there's a lot of controversy in the deaf community about cochlear implants, but for someone that would prefer to hear, this can be a profound impact on their life. I mean, literally turning a deaf person into a hearing person. Now, the thing is, if you do this with older people, they'll often go through the surgery but turn it off after a couple of weeks. So imagine you're hearing the world through a garbage disposal, or more accurately, 6 of them, each with a slightly different pitch. So this is a vocoder. And it's awful. You can't understand what anyone's saying. You can't listen to music. You lose all of the fidelity of the world. Musicians never listen to music again. And again, older people, my age and on, just turn it off. And that's a huge loss. So I thought, well, we have a system that learns how to hear. What if we could design a cochlear implant that did what this baby's brain is doing, which is learn, change, adapt, plasticity in the brain. And it turned out it worked. We just did some early trials in a simulated vocoder experiment with normal hearing college students, your classic college project, and they heard 50% more words, and they did it within 20 minutes of experiencing this for the first time. Just to give you a sense, the very first experiment we ever ran, we had a whole set of experiments set up to run through the weekend, and the lab head called me up, left a message, I didn't get it unfortunately, and said, oh, your stimuli are all corrupted, I sent everyone home. It's like, oh, Jesus, no, that was the actual experiment. What's amazing is after 20 minutes, you could understand what people were saying in our context, but not with a traditional cochlear implant. So this was my introduction to building something that could change people's lives. And it was a powerful introduction. The idea that you could do something that had a profound impact on an individual person. I want to be rich. I never want to worry about sending my kids to college or paying the rent. But I'll admit, the thing that really drives me as an entrepreneur is this. And it started with this project. So this is another network. This is sort of an early version of a deep neural network. So this is a multi-layer sparse generative network. You're only seeing one part of it. This is the first layer, and clearly it's learning faces. There was another part that learned how people perceive faces. So this was based on an active learning feedback system. What would we do? People would log in, they'd see 18 faces, and they'd choose the sexiest one. So this was a website. It was based on work I did actually as an undergrad, doing lie detection for the CIA off of video. Really the sort of thing that leaves you with a dark and tarnished soul. To make myself feel better, when my first tech entrepreneurial project, after being here, actually just over at the Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience, we made what any good entrepreneur would make with incredible technology, an incredibly sleazy game called SexyFace. So you log in, you see 18 faces, you pick the ones you think are sexy, and it automatically starts learning what drives your decision behavior. And it really worked. And so after a couple of screens, it would know who you think are sexy. And our promise was, for free, we'll find everyone on Facebook that you think is sexy. And for $5, we'll find everyone who thinks you're sexy. But the reality is it's a Trojan. The real reason we did this, and by the way, it didn't just learn sexy, it could learn any face category. Purely as an aside, if you have people pick faces for competence, the network learns to be selective for CEOs. And amongst CEOs, it learns to be selective for CEOs of large public companies. Unfortunately, it is not selective for the actual performance of those companies. It says something about the millions of dollars people put into executive search firms every year. But this Trojan was for a project for the United Nations. So it's called Refugees United, and the problem is this. There are today over 1 million orphan refugees in UN camps, refugee camps around the world. When we did this project, it was largely, though not exclusively, in Africa. But of course, as you might imagine, there are massive numbers of orphans in refugee camps in Jordan, Turkey, and Syria right now. And these kids show up, their parents have died, or they've become separated, they're too young to know what village they're from, and they're simply lost in the system. And there is literally a book, or at least 10 years ago there was, I hope it's on an iPad now or something, but it has 1 million photographs in it. And so if you're from Damascus and you haven't heard from your sister's family for weeks and you're fearing the worst and you go to a camp, in Jordan, they give you a book, and you start looking. And boy, you hope you maintain focus when that picture went by. So we actually built this system to do an incredibly sleazy game, which would train it on how people thought about faces. So then, and using essentially the same network, instead of selecting the faces that are sexy or the faces that are competent, you select faces that are sort of in the direction of the child you're looking for. And we found within 3 to 5 screens, about 50 to 100 faces, the person you're looking for is almost certainly on the next screen if they're in the system. So this was another powerful experience. How you could take some fancy science that I had worked on years ago as an undergrad and do something that could actually change someone's life with it. This got me really excited. Now, another thing I learned on this project, which we did jointly with Ericsson, was I wasn't trying to build face recognition. Actually, I was trying to do an ed tech startup. I just thought, because I knew something about faces, we could take the algorithms I developed and demonstrate them in a really easy to understand concept. So instead of learning about students, we'd learn about faces. So we went and pitched VCs, a number of them. And this was before Khan Academy got hot and sort of recent ed tech bubble. And here's actually a response I got from one VC. You can read students' minds? Here's $2 million if you do financial fraud detection. Needless to say, that wasn't particularly aligned with what I wanted to accomplish. But this is a reality, is orphan refugees are not the most lucrative market in the world. And someone that's putting money into your startup, probably not all that excited about the potential payoff to their limited partners, which includes them, in this context. So you have to find where these two things align. And that was a hard thing to transition through. I would say we can change students' lives. And what I heard back from them was, what's in it for me? And I kind of felt betrayed by that. Like, isn't this just intrinsically worth doing? But of course, it's not for them. Venture capital is a business, as is angel investing. If you want to go do a nonprofit project, which I'm on, I think, 5 nonprofit boards right now, go do it. It's an amazing life. In fact, why choose? Do them all. Do nonprofit work, do entrepreneurialism, get into industry, continue to do academic work. It's very open and fluid in the world today. But understand each one of those and what works in each of those domains. But there was a lot more to be learned than just that. So this is as far as I know, and as far as, in fact, Google knows, the only presidential portrait ever taken with Google Glass. So I got invited to I think this is the 2nd annual LGBT Pride White House event. Someone had asked if I would be interested in being the Assistant Undersecretary of Labor, to which I said, hell no, but I still got invited to the White House. And I wore Google Glass. There's a reason, which I'll get to in just a moment. So my first words to the president were, okay, Glass, take a picture. He thought I was a complete and total crazy person. I mean, really. In fact, they already thought I was a crazy person. As you can tell, the Secret Service is pushing everyone else away. And he wanted to meet me because I was wearing a live camera on my head inside the White House. I swear that I asked for permission, but I don't think anyone believes me anymore. So this was another case where I thought we could do something really impactful, and I'm not going to go into the details here, but it never emerged as a great entrepreneurial project. We did it purely academically. This was taking Google Glass and reading your facial expressions, computing what's called the facial action codes, processing it on a server side, and then writing the emotion in Glass. Now, Google doesn't want that to happen. I mean, they supported, this was an early release pair because I had been part of a team that was brainstorming ideas of what could be done with Glass, but they were really afraid of what people would think if they actually did face recognition or emotion recognition with Google Glass. But my goal here was to give this to autistic kids. So imagine you take a child who can't read facial expressions. but can learn it. It's like a foreign language. You don't get it for free, but you can work at it. So take that child, give them Google Glass. Whenever they're actually interacting with someone, they can tell, okay, it's a dead stare right now. There's a little smile. Okay, they can see that that's a smile and some expression of happiness and learn that foreign language. And they really can. In fact, when they do it, it actually increases their empathy and their ability to understand other people. It's another project that I was enormously proud of, but simply had no legs as an entrepreneurial endeavor. Totally worth doing. I'm thrilled that I was there, but I have to think about problems now in simple terms. Is there a market, and is the technology mature? If technology is not mature and there's no market, it's an academic project. So I'm not talking that much about it today, but to me, my lone remaining real academic interest is cognitive neuroprosthetics. So can I jam things in your brain and literally make you smarter? And I think in 20 to 30 years, this will fundamentally change the definition of what it means to be human. There's a big question there. Does it change it for everybody or only for the people that can afford it? But it's coming. To me, it's a much more immediate technology issue than AI in some vague, evil God sense. But it's coming. So if there's a mature technology but there's no market, that's a nonprofit project. The problem with nonprofit projects is typically you have to go back to some billionaire family every couple of years and convince them. This is what you need to do. Convince them it was their idea. You really want to get them to support it. I can't believe you have this amazing, I built it just based on what I heard you talk about. And that's what you have to do. And that's, it's a drag. Ultimately, I believe in sustainable entrepreneurship, which to me is finding how projects for good align with some real interest in society. Sometimes that interest is really only collectively held, let's say, by the government or an NGO. But what we found is so often there is someone that it can be a direct beneficiary of, let's put it this way, helping the world. Before I do that, really quickly, this is purely an aside. The reason I was wearing Google Glass in the White House is because of this kid, scientifically identified as the cutest child in the entire world. A panel of 2 scientists were polled on this. They both agreed fervently. Yes, it was his mother and I, but we're scientists, so of course we're always completely objective. So this is Felix, and 4.5 years ago, he was diagnosed with diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And I was completely blown away by how he was treated. And I don't mean poorly. I mean the way that the doctors dealt with diabetes was they asked us to write down a couple of numbers, and then they thought about it for 2 or 3 minutes, and they said, here's what we're going to do for the next 6 months. And I thought, we were recording everything my son ate, down to the gram, every activity level, everything about him, and they didn't want any of that data. So here's an aside. If anyone brings you a bunch of data in your day-to-day life and you say, what am I supposed to do with this? Your job's done. 5, 10 years, but just mark it. If you don't know what to do with data in your day-to-day life, probably not an issue for this particular crowd, but the job's over. And I think the future of medicine is a perfect example. Don't go get a radiology degree right now. So I was shocked by the way this was done. It felt like what a doctor could have done 100 years ago had someone actually figured out insulin back then. So instead, we started hacking his devices. He wears a continuous glucose monitor every 15 minutes. It estimates his blood glucose levels, every 5 minutes actually for this one. He was wearing a Basis band, which think kind of like an Apple Watch nowadays. So we get heart rate, activity levels, sort of poor mom's galvanic skin response, kind of sweat amount. He has a wireless insulin pump. We have all these devices, and we're tracking everything, measuring everything to the gram. Now, first off, all of these devices are black box. They take the data and they send it to Dexcom's server or to Fitbit's server. So we had to hack all those. Little Python code, old Android phone, and now all that data is going to my AWS server, where I have, which very likely violates federal law or something. But it's crazy. I had to hack these systems to get data that was literally being pulled out of my son's body. So I didn't own it, they did, which I find reprehensible. So we did that, and then I built a model. And what that model does is, in real time, it updates what the insulin pump settings ought to be. It gives recommendations about dosing regimens. And then, somewhat unplanned, but wonderfully, it turns out it pretty accurately predicts about an hour into the future whether his blood glucose levels will go low or high. So in the White House, in DC, my son's back here in San Francisco with my sister, and I get a notice. This is why I was wearing Google Glass everywhere. I get a notice that in a half an hour, his blood glucose levels will go low. And I sent a text to my sister and asked her to give him a cracker. So that's pretty amazing. 4 years later, Medtronic has announced at the Leo CES that they have developed a glucose monitor that predicts 20 minutes into the future. I very genuinely tweeted out, hooray, and then quite snidely followed up with, and it only took you 4 years and $40 million more than it took me. By the way, I'm the fake kind of doctor, so I literally can't share this with anyone else. If I even give it to one other person, that would be giving medical advice, and the FDA is actually pretty hard-ass about doing that sort of thing. So we donated it to a nonprofit called the Typo Foundation. But again, this was something that was worth doing, regardless of whether there was an outcome that I was going to directly profit from. Someone was, and it was going to make the world better. And that's the first decision process for me. And it's worthwhile, even if it doesn't immediately lead to some really tangible payoff. But let's take some time, maybe, depending on where we are, and talk about tangible payoffs. All right, you seem to have taken a break on me here, thing. There we go. Oh, we have one more. But this one's interesting. This is about where we're starting to tie some things together. So I sit on the board of a small company in New York called Emoja. And I'm their chief science advisor as well as a board member. And we develop technology to passively track people's emotional states in real time. Yeah, I know, it's all very spooky. And the purpose of the company is market research. So we did a project, for example, with the MTA, the New York City subway system, where we wanted to know, are people happy or sad before they get on the train? Did we make them sad after? What is it's generally sad afterwards. But how much and on which lines in real time? And it's a pretty powerful idea to be able to tie these emotional reactions to developing better products. I made them promise me they would never get into ad selling. But I also made them promise me that I would be able to use this data for predicting manic and depressive episodes in bipolar sufferers. So here we have a real convergence. There's a huge market for doing market research. And no one's really doing this kind of robust, continuous emotion estimation. So that's a great start for a business, if you can figure out how to do it. And because we're collecting all this data, even in an unsupervised way, I can just go in and play around with it and see what emerges. And it turns out we have access to a volunteer pool of people that have bipolar, and we can clearly see, long before they're aware of it, that they are headed towards a manic episode. So if you're not familiar, watch Homeland. The main character there has bipolar disorder. So this is this classic, creative, frenetic, explosive experience, which then ends in like a complete and total collapse and institutionalization. And it really does. Turns out bipolar disorder is the costliest mental health disorder in the world. About $70 billion a year goes into treatment and lost productivity. And the idea, again, that just piggybacking on this very simple business plan, you could reach out and also do some real good for people is a powerful idea. Okay, so that is the initial tour through some work and my transition out of academia. But there's an important element there, which is as an academic, I was used to simply saying, well, what's the most ambitious project I could go after? You know, what is really going to have a big impact? What's going to, if you want to be careerist about it, what's going to become a Nature paper or get some coverage in the press? And there, for example, the work I started off with, the system that learned how to hear, we submitted to the NIPS conference way back when they actually did neuroscience, and the reviews were very positive, but almost universally people said things like, it's not really that new of an algorithm, is it? And like, we discovered something pretty fundamental about human hearing. Who cares whether it was a new algorithm? But you always want the new hotness in this field. And the question is does that translate out into the entrepreneurial world? So I've done 7 startups now. 4 of them I've been the founder, and the other 3 I've been on the sort of founding executive team. For the company Guild, I was the chief scientist. So they had a very specific proposition, at least where they started. They took a lot of standard off-the-shelf software, and they used it to assess all open source code. I mean, all of it. Everything in GitHub, everything in Bitbucket, everything in Google Code, and God forbid, SourceForge. Back then, it was not nearly as much as it is now, but that was the ambition. We're going to rate everything. And the product will be, for a company like Google or Facebook, you could go and search Boston JavaScript. And we give you a rank ordering of all the best JavaScript developers in Boston. Now you could go hire them. So there were a couple of problems with that. The main one was this. We actually had some fairly high-end, big customers of ours. Google was one of them at the time, till the New York Times wrote about that and said it out loud, and then they dropped us the next day. Google came back 2 weeks after they started with us, as it was still in beta, the original product, and said, we need more names. So it turns out all of open source was not enough. So, several 100,000 people wasn't enough to be a robust product for a lot of our biggest customers. So still in beta, the 2 co-founders come to me and say, we need to expand this out. There's probably 11 million software developers worldwide. Can you help us predict who's the best JavaScript developer? From essentially scraping 100 different websites. So now, 300,000 people isn't our product, it's our training set. And 11 million people are our product. Is it possible to take Facebook and LinkedIn data and actually predict whether anyone's good at C, or Python, or JavaScript, or Agile development, or any of these sorts of things? So this guy here is named Jade Dominguez. He was a pretty good high school student. Grew up down in LA. Took AP classes, all that sort of thing. But no one in his family had ever gone to college, and he didn't either. But he's still a very kind of entrepreneurial guy. So he started making T-shirts and just selling them out on the street in LA. These sort of self-designed stuff. And he does that for a little while, and he thinks, I bet I can make more money if I start a website. So think sort of push-button, WordPressy kind of site. And he creates this website, and sure enough, he sells more T-shirts. But now he's thinking, this isn't good enough. I need to be able to make my own website. So he teaches himself Ruby, which, if you don't happen to be familiar, is one of the most popular web framework languages in the world. And he builds his own website, and he sells even more T-shirts. But now he doesn't care about T-shirts anymore. Now he doesn't care about that website anymore. He's thinking, Ruby's frustrating. It should be better. So he starts contributing to the code base of Ruby. Totally self-taught. Then he thinks, why the hell am I selling T-shirts in LA? I should go get a software developer job in Silicon Valley. So for a year, he starts sending resumes up to the Valley. and doesn't even get a single no. Why? Well, this has been studied for a very, very long time. With your average recruiter, you get 5 seconds. They look at your name. His last name is Dominguez. Guess what that does to a software recruiter in Silicon Valley? You can be honest about it. It's not the right name to have. He really needs to change that. Next, they look at your university. None. Then they look at your last job. None. Isn't even worth their time to type back, no thanks. Then at the end of that year, he gets a call from this startup in San Francisco. And they say, our algorithm tells us you're the second best Ruby developer in all of Los Angeles. Can we invite you up for a job interview? Needless to say, that was us. We were eating our own dog food. He was one of the first sort of big success stories in our system. He had no history, but he had a big Google repository, in this case, GitHub repository. We'd analyzed all of the code, and then it turned out we started analyzing the comments and comments by followers, and then we started analyzing question and answers on Bitbucket, Stack Exchange. And by the way, social queues, terrible, useless. How many upvotes you've gotten on Stack Overflow doesn't tell me anything. Here's a clever, simple little algorithm for ranking people on Stack Overflow. Who answers whose questions? That's it. Set of pairwise comparisons. You can do a unidimensional linear embedding. Suddenly, you've stack ranked everybody. Turns out, strongly agrees with most engineering managers' assessments of the ordering of talent on Stack Overflow. But the social data was totally useless. So we find this guy, and we hire him to be our lead front-end developer. And he was awesome, rough around the edges. He'd never worked on a team before. A little bit like me, he didn't maybe care as much about the business side as he did about what we were trying to do, which in the case of Guild was to take bias out of the hiring process. Broadly defined. Yes, gender, race, but also university and skill sets and grades and test scores. In fact, I'm going to come back to what I'm going to say next. I want to say something, if you're kidding, clear, I'm a little off the cuff here to sort of integrate the aspects of what I learned about product and the transition from an academic. Here's what I learned about product here. If I went to a recruiter and I said the following, you pay me $10 a month and I will give you a single name, sort of person of interest style. It'll be a name and a phone number. And you're going to call this person, and they'll be the best hire you ever had. I'll do that once a month for $10. By the way, the typical bounty inside of a company, internal referral bonus is about $5,000. Perfect hire every 10 minutes. You think you just got a sale. Oh, transformational. Hell no. Here's the response. It's not really my process. I like to go through about 5,000 in-mails on LinkedIn a day and send them out. And I feel like I really need to get about a hit rate of a 1%. And he said, I don't think you understand what I just said. You don't need to do any of that. We'll give you the magic name every month. It's not really my process. So, and we did things like that at Guild. And the universal failures, like they should have been doing that. But they won't. So what I often say is I have a very bad habit in product development. I build broccoli. I build the things that people ought to use. Guess how many people like to buy broccoli? It's not a great sales strategy. And ultimately, that's what you have to do. You need someone using your product. So at Guild, what we needed to do was figure out there's this moment. There's a moment in like every target customer's life when, without realizing it, they're reaching for a product. There's a moment when a faculty member is grading homework where they're reaching for something to help them, give some insight on what to say back to the student. Here, there's a moment when you're running through a resume where you'd like to get a little bit more information about, a little bit more confidence in your decision. Not a completely new behavior. If you've trying to build a company on a completely new behavior, good luck. I'm not saying it can't happen, but you probably should take that VC money and go buy lottery tickets. Here, what we had to do was move away from trying to completely reinvent recruiting, even though, as anyone who's been sort of out to a typical entrepreneurial talk, it almost always starts off with recruiting is broken, education is broken, healthcare is broken. It's like, actually, most of these things probably aren't broken. Society seems to function pretty well, but they certainly can be improved. And most of these attempt to completely revolutionize the world just fail over and over again. Here's another example. Over the last 5 years, I have probably been pitched on Google Docs for medical records 1,000 times. Now, what is amazing is that up through this 1,000th pitch, people still think it's a novel idea. But nonetheless, even apart from the fact that it really isn't novel, often the pitch involves some comment like the following. Did you know nurses spend as much as an hour every day on the phone with one another, exchanging medical records at doctors' offices? We can end that. And here's what I say back. Here's the reframing of your sales pitch to those nurses, because, by the way, they run that medical office. Here's your pitch. That hour a day that you actually enjoy doing your job, we want to take that away. Guess, again, how useful that is as a technology pitch. You think you know, because you're so smart, you're engineering students at UC Berkeley, if they just do what you said, their life would be better. But they won't, and they never will. You need to figure out how to take your incredibly cool technology and find that moment when they're reaching for it and put it right in their hand. From there, you might be able to lead them to a new behavior. But otherwise, nothing is going to come out of it. I'm probably not going to spend much time on this, but I just gave a TED Talk titled The Fanatic. And if you're curious, you can ask me about it. It was what we discovered about what was predictive. Because we started with engineers, software developers. And then we did salespeople, and then we did designers, ended up with a database of 122 million people looking at what actually predicted career outcomes. And there was this really amazing finding. Go see the talk sometime. So I'm going to transition to another domain where I'm working right now, and that's education, or sort of broadly defined education. And there's a similar problem here, right? People develop educational technology all the time. We're in this big ed tech bubble right now. The dirty secret of educational technology, though, is almost nothing works. Even things that work beautifully in the lab completely fail out in the wild, which is incredibly disappointing. I know some of the people that have developed this technology. I know that they mean well, and that it really did work. But as soon as they roll it out in the real world, it breaks down. Why? I think it comes right back to you're trying to change people's behaviors. And that's a losing proposition. Not just do people not want to buy it, but then when the district forces it down their throat, hey, teachers, you're going to be teaching assistants now. The computer's going to teach algebra to the kids. Sorry about that. It doesn't work. So I have a very different approach to education. It is, what can we take out of an active classroom? Just, I call it naturalistically or surreptitiously, and say something interesting, something that can actually make a teacher's job easier. So in this particular case, what you're looking at, every dot here is in a three-dimensional projection out of a 100-dimensional space. It is a location in semantic space in a discussion forum for an undergrad biology course. So there were about 10,000 students in this course talking to each other about biology. And we built a system that learned biology from the students themselves, just talking to each other. Faculty wasn't involved. We didn't look at the textbooks. Clearly it was non-normative. It learns the good and the bad and the ugly about how students think about biology. But here it was neat. We just layer this very simple logistic regression on top to predict the grades. And what we found was when new students entered that class, we did the same thing, by the way, in an MBA course with economics, an economics course with MBA students. When new students entered that class, just from listening to them in the online discussion forum, we knew at week 1 what grade they would get. Right away. So this is amazing. A cool, incredible technology to change the world. Let's go out. And we go to teachers and they'd say, wow, that's cool and kind of spooky. What am I supposed to do with it? Right? They've got a 40-hour-a-week job. Well, frankly, they got a 70-hour-a-week job. They're only getting paid for 40 of it. And now I'm saying, well, I can figure out who's going to flunk your class. I can tell you what misconcepts they'll have. And what they're really thinking internally is, that sounds like another 20 hours a week. When am I supposed to do that? You know, I need help with the problems I'm actually solving right now. I don't need whole new sets of problems to go solve. And so this amazing thing languished a little bit. Then there's the other side, which is, here's a little preview of my TED Talk, grades aren't predictive of anything, either career-wise or in young kids. Nor are there test scores. By the way, your university is only modestly predictive of various things, but you're still really good. So what can we do? So we have this incredible technology that 1, predicts something which isn't predictive, and 2, no one knows what to do with. Not a great product to bring to market. But an incredible problem to solve. I won't even explain this except to say we went through, did some economic modeling. If we could take what it turned out is actually predictive of life outcomes and intervene on it, it would add somewhere between 1.3 and 1.8 trillion dollars a year to the US economy. This is not hypothetical. This is looking at a body of research where people actually made interventions in the lives of 3-year-olds and then looked to see 30 years later what happened. Just taking those numbers, we then scaled that across the United States. $1.5 trillion. A new Google every year, a trip to Mars, and most of Medicaid covered. So totally worthwhile if you can figure out who the hell's going to pay for it. So this is sort of the close then. This is what we ended up with. This started as a project from a keynote I gave at South by Southwest. I said, what if we could put microphones in the classroom with kindergartners? Record everything that they say and everything that gets said back to them. And then, to extend a little bit from the comments in the moment, we predict their life outcomes. How long they'll live, how happy they'll be, how far they'll go in their education, how much money they'll make. And then use that to figure out what you should do with that kid right now. Who cares about the grades? So they're going to flunk algebra. What does it mean for their life outcomes? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Turned out I flunked out of college. I have a very colorful history. The one thing my parents could have used was someone saying, don't worry, it's all going to be okay. So this was my proposal. And it ended up in a project jointly with UT Austin to do exactly that. Microphones in the classroom with migrant kindergartners recording everything they were saying, predicting their life outcomes, or at least implicitly predicting their life outcomes. Because it turns out it doesn't do any good whatsoever to share that information. Only makes things worse. If you're building product, do your research. Every problem you think you're solving for the first time has been researched for 100 years. Read the literature. There's an incredible literature on this space. Sounds like a great idea to share outcomes. It's a terrible idea. We never even needed to test it. Instead, what we ended up doing is sending single messages out to parents, targeted. Hey, Dad, Maria's really interested in seahorses right now. Take 15 minutes and talk to her about seahorses. Why did we do that message? Because we literally predicted it would improve her life outcomes. So then we went and built Muse, which we're in a closed beta right now with a set of parents, but there's a much bigger story to it. So with Muse, lots of fancy machine learning, but it's all behind the scenes, all completely server-side. So my son breaks out the crayons and draws a picture. I snap a photo of it, share with his grandma, CC Muse. My daughter, I pick her up this afternoon. I didn't, my wife is, but were I to pick her up, she's almost certainly tell me a story. It's talk all the time. Believe it or not, my kids talk a lot. I hit a button, grab 30 seconds of that audio. Both of those streamed to me. We built some clever little deep neural networks to do some unsupervised analysis of that input. Then we ask a single question a day. The reality is we have a database of tens of thousands of questions, and we predict against it every single day. And then using another active learning model, we identify the single question where we would get the biggest information gain. And we ask that one single question. Most of them are just yes, no. Why? Why is it so easy? Whenever you wanted to take a photo, whenever you want, people pay thousands of dollars to go down to Kaplan and prep for their standardized tests, because the vast majority of parents won't do that. The ones that will, their kids are probably pretty well off already. So how can we make something that's going to provide some real value back and be used by parents that otherwise would never do anything like this? Make it so easy, and fun that it's foolish not to do it. So a yes/no question, once a day. And each day we send that message. Here's the one thing you should do tonight to have the biggest impact on your child's life. By the way, a lot of those messages are about the parent. Take an hour for yourself, relax, de-stress. Turns out stress in the household is a huge negative predictor of life outcomes for kids. So we built this. Now, where's the business model behind this? Fancy technology. Afterwards, if anyone wants to ask, I'm happy to go into the technical details. But turns out there are 3 potential broad benefits. One, you can guess. It's just a community benefit. The idea of changing the life outcomes of kids is profound and powerful, and I'm all over it whether someone can pay for it or not. So we started a nonprofit. Actually, just today, it got approved by the IRS, so now we can just give it away for free. But how are we going to sustain that? Well, here's 2 other direct benefits that come out of it. One is workforce development. So this is long-term, 10, 15, 20 years, but the research is unambiguous. These are the kids that will be ready for the workforce of tomorrow. If you're a company or a region or a government with a long-term interest in workforce development, this is worth paying for. And that's exciting, and that was a starting point for us. But then we discovered something new. It turns out the parents of these kids are more productive. There's less stress at home, things are going better, less cognitive demand, they show up, decreased absenteeism, increased retention, and increased productivity. And it turns out, because we built it, basically it runs on text messages. Purely SMS, except for that audio component. We have an app that handles that. So we can deliver it virtually for free, less than $1 a month. So we start going to companies and saying, you can do this thing that I bet your philanthropic arm is already doing. Support your local schools. You can do it directly by just giving this to all of your employees. And it will cost so little that if we prevent 1 day of absenteeism across 350 employees in a year, it will have paid for itself. So maybe it's not wildly ambitious from an economic standpoint. We're never likely to get super rich doing this, but that's not the point. It pays for itself. And it does it by providing a real value back to, in this case, a number of Fortune 500 companies that have an interest in seeing their communities developed, long-term workforce sustained, and immediate payoff in terms of the productivity gains of their employees. Doing good, making a little bit of money for the growth and sustainability, but ultimately tying it to something that people need. I've got 2 kids. I think my wife and I are eminently qualified as parents. She used to be at the School of Education here at UC Berkeley. Now she runs research for the San Francisco School District. You'd think we'd know what we're doing, but I have never cried as much as the first year of my son's life. It is a hard job, hard. And every day I am reaching for something to make it easier. And what I was surprised about is my kids were the first ones signed up for this, is how fun it is. We had someone respond on Facebook and say, quoting their own kid, "Mom, what does the robot say we should do tonight?" So that's cool. We get to change people's lives. We create a sustainable business. And it really boils down to not making the fanciest, most ambitious educational technology play we could, where we took over the classroom and we have our own curriculum and we're going to change STEM. It says, what if we could just send text messages to parents right at the moment that they really need it and have an impact on something they truly care about, which is the life outcomes of their kids. And then find someone that's willing to pay for it because they get a direct benefit too. This is at the heart of building a really great product that has a purpose. Beyond that, I can't comment. There are plenty of great entrepreneurs whose goal is to build a great company. Needless to say, I'm only marginally good at that. But I do enjoy it. It's fun being an entrepreneur. It's fun actually building things that affect the world. But this has been my path to success. Turn down all those amazing, crazy job offers. Stick with the things that truly get you excited. Stick with the things where your mom says, you know, you really need to let other people talk every now and then because you just get so worked up about it. And here is just a little close here. My philosophy is build superpowers. If you are taking an autistic kid and giving them the superpower of reading facial expressions, if you took me and gave me the superpower of being 2,000 miles away from my son, but knowing exactly that he is healthy or wouldn't be in the future, frankly, if someone walks into a dark room and flips a switch and a light comes on, I do a lot of talks for GE, that's a superpower. You know, you change that person's experience. Maybe it's not that exciting one anymore, but think that way. Where can I, you know, everyone has a wish for a superpower. Can you build it and put it right in their hand right when they want it? This is a little off the topic of product development, but embrace cyborgs. Cognitive neuroprosthetics are coming, and I don't care. This is a crowd that could very well be involved in building some of them, but take an interest in it because we should collectively be deciding what happens, not DARPA or you know, their equivalent in China or Google or anyone else. I have a pretty sweet spot for Google, by the way. Doesn't mean that I defer to them in what I want them to do with my data or my life. Foster fanaticism. I didn't talk about the TED Talk at all, but that's the core of it. Fanaticism is that thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's a thing you do even when there's no reason to do it. When I had an office actually down at the School of Education for a while, and there was a woman whose office was at one end of the hall, an associate professor. Her lab was at the other end. 2-3 times a day, she'd run past my door. Grown woman, she'd run past my door. Why? Because she's weird, because her experiments are so important she has to be there right away? Hell no. It's education, come on, it's not that important, right? No, it's because she couldn't be bothered to walk. What a waste of time, walking down the hallway. You're thinking of going into science? That's your competition. You may be smarter or not, but it's the person that's running down the hallway that's gonna win in the end. Don't fake it. Find the thing where you wouldn't think of not running. By the way, you won't necessarily love that thing. The research is really clear. The whole find what you love, oh my God, what terrible advice. That is how many people have walked away from the thing that they could truly build a life on because they didn't love it in the moment. There's no evidence to suggest that people have some amazing immediate resonance with the thing that makes them successful. And then the final thing is reincarnate. I always finish all of my university talks this way, even if they're slightly off topic, but I love it. Saturday morning breakfast cereal. Anyone of you who doesn't know it, it's basically dirty jokes for physicists. But every now and then he's a little more philosophical. Here's something true. One day you will be dead. By the way, I loved this strip so much, I wrote the comic and said, can I use this in my talks? And he wrote back one word, badass. Which I took to be a legally binding contract. Here is something false. You only live once. It takes about 7 years to master something. All right, the research literature is actually very complex on this, but okay. If you live to be 88, after age 11, you have 11 opportunities to become truly great at something. Now, often with undergrads, particularly in an engineering department, someone will walk up to me afterwards and say, my parents are making me get an engineering degree, but I really want to be a journalist. And I say, wow, imagine how you'll see the world differently than every other journalist once you get that engineering degree. Why is that okay? Because I know it seems like you're making decisions right now that define the rest of your life, but you're not. Those are your 11 lifetimes, your 11 opportunities to be truly great at something. A great engineer, a great journalist, a great poet. Most people never let themselves die. I've always just known I was good at organizing spreadsheets, and so on and so on. There are a lot of ways in which people fail to understand this, but this is my personal quote. 2 years till I die. I wonder what I'm going to do next. I've been a theoretical neuroscientist. I've been a labor economist. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a mom. I'm writing 2 books right now. I've done a lot of things. Let me be clear, if you didn't read my bio, I've been a man. I've done a lot of different things. And that is awesome. That is what your life should be about. You should not ever settle in and think, well, this is my life. I don't care if you're 82, you've got another life ahead of you. Spend a life writing poems. It's frequently in that state of mind. Spend another building things. Spend a life looking for facts and another looking for truth. These are your lifetimes, and this is the important part. Please use them. Thank you very much.
It's only 9:15.
Oh, you're lucky. I was once asked to give a talk on how AI would affect the African economy over the next 10 years. I did an extemporaneous talk for 4 hours. People were crying. They're just like bleeding out of their ears. It was really awful, but I get a little worked up sometimes.
I wanted to see if we have some questions. We've got about a good 10 minutes for questions.
Hello?
Introduce yourself and
Sure. My name is Tanvi Agarwal. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
So my question for you is, like you address most of the audience as STEM majors, my question for you is, what's your advice for non-STEM majors, perhaps people who are interested in STEM who aren't currently studying it? Do you think that they need to go run towards that STEM degree?
No, listen, clearly there's some things that are true about me. I think about the world in a particular way because I think about how differential equations work or large-scale matrix operations for neural networks. But the truth is, I started thinking about them because I studied the brain. When I took the math classes, it's like, why the hell is this the solution to this form of a differential equation problem? I didn't care, and I flunked out. And by age 25, I'd pretty much ground my life into the dirt. And then I got a job at a convenience store, and then I managed it and saved up enough money. I went back to school thinking I'd study the brain. And from there, it just opened up so much. I got so excited about it. So studying STEM transformed how I think about problems. But day to day, here's my job as an entrepreneur, is to put myself out of a job. So when I start a project, initially I'm the only one, and I'm coding up some initial version of an app, and I'm coding up the models because all of my work involves machine learning. I'm doing some sales, I'm doing all these sorts of things. But the truth is, I don't like to code. I don't even like doing data science anymore. It's just drag. There are people that are passionate about that, and my job is to find them and hire them. I'm pretty good at it, but only in the sense that if you chained me to a desk and said, your life will be awful if you don't build this model, then I can build a pretty good model. But there's nothing fundamental about my success to the fact that I do that work. In fact, The thing I learned in graduate school that's paid off the most for me is this: getting up and giving talks. If there's an open stage, people should be beating you off with a stick. You think you understand. Here I'm going to riff on Richard Feynman's famous quote, if you can't build it, you don't understand it. If you can't explain it, then you don't understand it. So there's nothing like going from a room full of high schoolers to a room full of fancy-smancy engineering students to a room full of senior executives or parents and trying to explain the exact same story to them. And in that sense, there's nothing fundamentally STEM about what I do. Frankly, I'm typically rather offended often when people say, wow, you're really good at that for a scientist. I'm like, what do you think we do? Like, 80% of our job is communications. All the best sort of high-end scientists actually generally pretty good talks. But this was my experience is, look, I'm a terrible networker. I'm a terrible schmoozer. The chance, so now I get to go and give a reception at the White House or give a keynote, as I will next week for The Economist in London, or give a talk at TED. And then people come up and want to talk to me, and I don't have to go network with them. And that comes from understanding how to communicate. If you want to be an entrepreneur, that's your number one job. Communications. Understanding another person and how an idea is going to resonate with them and how to craft it to get them to resonate in the way you want it to. So nothing fundamentally STEM there. I know there's a lot of, you need to learn how to code in this world, and guess what? Skills are not predictive of life outcomes. What's predictive of life outcomes is general cognitive ability, metacognition, which is problem solving, mindset, and personality, and creativity and emotion. The dozens of constructs under each one of those sort of superfamilies. I think if you really go at any problem space, any kind of scholarship, you can get a training in how to communicate with people. Everything else is just your particular tool set.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Satim Khan. So I had a quick question on how do you deal with the privacy concerns of parents that want to use Muse?
Yeah, so there's simple realities to privacy, and my starting point is to be completely honest. There is no completely safe data. So privacy from a data security standpoint is, are we doing everything rational and reasonable to protect the data and minimize the chance that some sort of breach might occur? Now, most of the time when people talk about privacy, they have some weird idea that it's all about that kind of privacy. You know, are my credit card numbers being kept safe and things like that? I actually am a lot less interested in that, simply because, one, again, there's nothing you can do to fundamentally make a network secure. But I want to know that people are doing the best we can. And the only thing I can say to a parent is what I just said, and hopefully make them believe that what I'm saying is true. Now there's a second kind of privacy, and this is the one that's actually crucial in medical work and in education, which is, am I ever going to do anything with your data? So the Gates Foundation put $100 million into a nonprofit company called, what was it? I don't think that's, the name is not coming to me, but after a couple of years, it folded. $100 million, gone. Why? All about privacy. Parents were paranoid about schools sharing data without their permission with what they basically perceived to be Microsoft, and that they were going to do something icky with it. Now I'm talking about like taking Google Glass and reading everyone's face, and like I could call up your credit score or your LinkedIn, or do you have a Grindr account? You know, this is a reality of what someone could do. So here again is my trust statement, because God knows, what could I do internally? How could anyone keep track of it? One is have someone audit that so you can have a third party review it, but we don't do anything with the data. Our business model is, in fact, even the companies themselves don't get it. They know whether someone's using their account, and that's it. So we don't share anything with anyone ever. It is the property of the parents or the kids if they're old enough. They have the right to pull it or delete it at any time they want to. I can't pull it back out of my models, but that's just the way that is. We're experimenting with the ideas of making our databases auditable by anybody, but of course that has its own then security issues associated with it. But ultimately my statement is this: it's your data, it's not ours. We don't do anything with it besides send those messages. If a parent believes that, they're in. In certain parts of the world, that's really easy to sell. As it turns out, for example, in China and India, no question, you can improve my kid's life. I don't care what you do with the data. Here in the United States, or even more so in Germany, no, you cannot have my kid's data. Unless I truly believe that you are a good person in your soul, you cannot have this data. And so we just make a blanket promise in our terms of service and in our, all of our legal documents that it's not our data and we're just borrowing it. And we don't give it to anyone ever. Now, this is kind of important. People are doing audio recordings. You know, what if there's like a drug deal going on in the background? What does that mean? Well, so the first thing we do is we don't store those audio. So all we store is our internal data model construct of that audio, which really sucks, because boy, would I love to store the audio itself and retrain and improve the models. But we just can't, because otherwise we're holding on to this information. And keep in mind, of course, is the modern case, we're not running our own server farm. We run everything, in our case, on top of Google Cloud and use Google Cloud messaging for our services. And this includes not just our education work, but we have projects inside schools and projects inside companies. No one wants their data set on Google servers, because no one fully believes, or Amazon for that matter, that it's not getting looked at every now and then. Google, of course, claims that it's not. It's all supposed to be encrypted and they can't do it, but that's not your problem. Your problem is making your customer believe it. So again, our biggest thing that we can do is make commitments and make people believe that we're keeping them. We don't store anything that isn't encrypted. In our case, we call it encrypted because it's stored internally in our model set. And like, if you can figure that out, you're better than I am. And you know, we're never gonna give it to anyone else. Beyond that, what are you gonna do? The Gates Foundation is generally trying to do something good. They founded a company that was genuinely trying to do something good. I know, because I wasn't involved in the company, but I was involved in the sort of the thought process that led up to the company. And it completely failed, because no one would share their data with them. So part of our thought here, by the way, is that's why we're going to go straight to parents. No intermediary. We're not collecting data out of the classroom, outside of the parent's reach, because again, you're just inviting a parent revolt. We go directly to the parents. It is their data. They collect it. They have the relationship with us.
So I am thinking, just in the interest of time, actually I'm thinking, to be perfectly honest, I'm thinking, wow, maybe you could do a relationship app also, what you should ask your significant other every evening. But exactly, that's probably too much information. But I want to give everybody the opportunity, if you want to come up and talk to Dr. Ming, and be cognizant of your time, and give about 5 minutes to do that. Thank you again.